Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going over print and cut with Cricut. I'm going to try and make this as practical as possible and also go through some troubleshooting at the end. This is how much paper I've wasted trying to calibrate my Cricut, and here's our little Hammy that I just had to get in frame. She's so freaking adorable. I'm going to be open and honest. I got extremely frustrated with print and cut on Cricut. It was really difficult to make this video. I've wasted so much paper and ink trying to calibrate my machine. I did eventually find a workaround, which I'll discuss later in the troubleshooting section of the video. My machine was calibrated and cutting properly prior to the video, and it might just be user error, but I didn't think I would have such a difficult time. My machine is still not cutting in the center, so I'll probably calibrate it or try to figure out how to fix this off camera. I just thought I needed to mention this because not everything is always so perfect, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. But with that being said, I still hope you find the video helpful. Before we begin, there are some things you're going to need. The first thing you'll need is an inkjet printer. I use the Canon Inktank G3420. The ink lasts a very long time and it's done an amazing job so far for all my print and cut projects. The next thing you'll need is a Cricut. I am using my Cricut Explore Air 2, but this will also work with the Maker series. You'll need a computer. You're also going to need to download and install Cricut Design Space. To do this, head on over to design.cricut.com/hash/. Click on the box to agree to the terms of use and then click on download. Once downloaded, Design Space should be in your downloads folder. Double click on that and your computer will begin the installation process. Follow the on-screen prompts if there are any and create a Design Space profile if you haven't already. Next, you'll need a project file or design. You can get loads of designs on Design Space itself, or you can check out Design Bundles or Creative Market. I'll be using a design from Design Space and I'm just going to personalize it with my own text. Next, you'll need some sticker paper or paper for your print then cut project. I get most of my papers from Calibrating. So before we begin any print then cut project, we're going to need to calibrate our machine. If you have calibrated your machine already, you can skip over this step. But if you haven't, or your Cricut is cutting off center, then you will need to calibrate it. And calibrating your Cricut is basically just going to make sure that the Cricut is cutting in the correct place. So to do that, I am going to come over to these three little lines over here, and I'm going to click on calibration. Then you want to make sure that you have some copy paper loaded into your printer, and then we're going to click on print then cut. Then you can go ahead and select your printer from the drop-down menu. Mine is already selected. So I'm going to go ahead and click on print, and that will send that to our printer, and our printer will begin printing the calibration sheet. This is what your calibration sheet should look like once it's printed out. So we have some numbered and alphabetical lines and some shapes. Your Cricut is going to cut on these lines and shapes and ask you a few questions in Design Space based on those cuts, but don't worry, I'll walk you through it. So back on over in Design Space, I'm going to go ahead and click on continue. Now, Design Space is telling us to place our sheets in the top left corner of our cutting mat and then click continue. So just make sure that you line this up really well on the grid of your cutting mat. If you don't line it up properly, your machine will not calibrate correctly. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click on continue. I'm going to come over to the drop down box over here and I'm going to select my Cricut Air, and I'm just connecting via Bluetooth. Okay, Design Space is going to tell us to prepare the machine. So we need to make sure that our fine point blade is loaded in clamp B, and then we will need to go ahead and load our mat. So over here, I'm just loading my cutting mat into the machine. And I did forget to mention that I just pressed go on my Cricut. Design Space will tell you to do that. So just press go and then the Cricut will begin scanning. So the first assessment that the Cricut will do is cut out the square. You can remove it if you want to, you don't have to. Just make sure that it has cut along the black line. If it has cut outside the black line, that isn't a good sign. Then you might need to do a basic calibration. But if it has, then we can move on to the next step. After the first assessment is done, Cricut Design Space is going to ask you, does the cut line touch the printed line all the way around? So you will just need to select yes or no. If you have selected no, then just follow the on-screen prompts and you will need to do a basic calibration. But mine is fine, so I'm going to go ahead and select yes, and then I'll click on continue. So now the Cricut will begin doing the fine calibration and it will cut those numbered and alphabetical lines. Once that is done, you will need to use these drop-down menus and select which one has cut through the middle of the black line. So for the top line, mine was 10, and for the right one, mine was K. You can go ahead and click continue. If it hasn't cut through the middle, you might need to do the calibration again. So the Cricut is now going to cut the middle rectangle. And once again, you'll need to just make sure that it has cut in the middle of the black line. If it hasn't, you will need to restart the calibration. Okay, once that is done with the third and final assessment, you just need to answer whether you're satisfied with the cut. So it should look like this and not like this. So just select yes or no. Mine did cut in the center. So I'm going to select yes, and I'm going to click on continue, and then the calibration will be finished. So I have my design ready to go over here. I did use some free cute little images from the images tab in Design Space, and I just added some text, and I went ahead and added an offset. So the white over here is an offset, and to get your image to be one solid shape for print and cut, all you would need to do is just flatten your image. I will try and make a tutorial on this. It's really simple. You just need to flatten everything together. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Make It. And then I'm going to do 18 copies of this. I think I can fit about 18 on my page. Perfect. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to make sure my material size is set to A4. You might need to change that, just depends on your material. And then I'm going to click on continue. Okay, so you will need to go ahead and print this out on your printer if you haven't already. And for my Canon, when I normally print on sticker paper, which is what I'm doing today, I'm making some stickers, I will normally select photo paper plus glossy, and I will select a high quality print. On Epson, I'm not too sure, I've never had an Epson before, but just make sure that you're selecting a high quality print and you're selecting a special kind of paper. And then the second step, so I'm just going to hit I've already printed because I actually have printed out my stickers already. I'm going to go over to the second step, and that is to set our base material. I am going to select washi tape, and that is going to give us beautiful Kiss Cut stickers. So I'm going to select that. And then the third step, we will just need to make sure that our fine point blade is loaded and our mat is loaded. And then the fourth and final step will be to press go on our Cricut, and we can see the magic happen. Let's go over some troubleshooting or issues you might come across. The machine isn't calibrated. If your machine isn't cutting in the right places or cutting off center, you will need to do a calibration. If it's still cutting off center after doing the calibration and you've ruled out everything else, then you need to check out Shamila's video. I actually tried this and it worked for me. She goes into detail and explains in depth a workaround. I'll link it in the video description. The sensors can't find your image. When you do print and cut, your image will have black boxes around it. These boxes act as registration marks, and your Cricut reads these to know where on the sheet it needs to cut. If anything is obscuring these boxes or your material isn't placed correctly or is bumpy, the Cricut will not cut correctly. Keep in mind that the sensors on your Cricut are light sensitive, and closing your lid when the Cricut is scanning could help. The image isn't flattened. If you haven't flattened your image into one shape, your Cricut will recognize this as individual cuts. The flatten tool can be found on the layers menu of the canvas. The wrong material settings. Make sure you're selecting the right materials for your print and cut project and that you're selecting the right size. It's also important that you're loading your cutting mat into your machine correctly as well. If you're still experiencing problems, you'll need to contact Cricut support. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!